This is 24 Patrol. Did you eat today? Did you have a choice what to eat?
If you answered yes, then you are one of the lucky ones. Because for millions of people around the world, having safe, healthy food is not always guaranteed.
Good day, everyone. My name is Prince Arcelo I, together with
Marian Barra,
Reporting. Just like what Kuya Kim always reminds us, lamang ang may alam. So today, let's make sure we know what food security really means.
When we say food security, it's not just about eating 3 times a day. It's about making sure that food is always available, accessible, safe, nutritious, and most importantly, sustainable for all. This is according to the Food and Agriculture Organization back in 2008.
According to Peng and Berry, the concept of food security evolves over time and varies based on context. Let's look back and see how the concept of global food security began as we welcome Troy and Mike for their report on the timeline and history of global food security.
In 1974, the World Food Conference defined food security through a supply lens. Availability of all times of adequate world food supplies of basic foodstuff to sustain a steady expansion of food consumption and to offset fluctuations in production and prices. This prioritized production amid the 1970s price shocks and protein energy deficiencies affecting more than 25% of the global population. However, persistent famines, despite adequate supplies, revealed the limitations in this availability-centric approach. So in 1983, the FAO expanded the definition to ensuring that all people at all times have both physical and economic access to the basic food that they need, acknowledging that availability alone couldn't guarantee consumption. Building on these access frameworks, temporal distinctions soon emerged. In 1986, the World Bank's Poverty and Hunger Report differentiated chronic and acute food insecurity, evolving the concept towards access of all people at all times to enough food for an active, healthy life. These elements converged a decade later in a comprehensive redefinition. As in 1996, the World Food Summit established the foundational modern standard when all people at all times have physical and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food that meets their dietary needs and food preferences for an active and healthy life, integrating nutrition and cultural acceptability. Post-1996 refinements further specified the dimension of access. As in 2001, the FAO's State of Food Insecurity report added explicit emphasis on social access to the 1996 definition. Systemic vulnerabilities exposed by the 2007 to 2008 food crisis prompted new focus on resilience. As in 2009, the World Summit on Food Security formalized stability as a fourth dimension requiring systems to withstand shocks, leading to today's definition of global food security. All people at all times have physical, social, and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food that meets their dietary needs and food preferences for an active and healthy life. And now let us listen to Mike's report on the history of global food security.
The global food system has undergone seismic shifts over the last century, driven by power dynamics in global politics. Before 1945, the colonial food regime saw colonists producing cash crops for European powers, neglecting local food needs and laying the foundation for long-term inequality. After World War II, the industrial and mercantile food regime emerged. The United States used food aid as geopolitical weapon, while the Green Revolution boosted yields but prioritized development over sustainability. In the 1980s and 90s, neoliberal reforms pushed by the IMF and World Bank forced countries to liberalize trade and cut subsidies. This shifted focus from local food sovereignty to export-driven, market-dependent systems. By the early 2000s, food was framed as global security issue, linking hunger with conflict and migration, prompting state-centered, sometimes militarized responses. Finally, the 2007 to 2008 global food crisis laid bare to the weaknesses of this system, as soaring prices and supply shocks pushed over 100 million people into hunger, raising urgent questions about justice, resilience, and food sovereignty worldwide. And that's all for the history and timeline of global food security. Back to Arsa.
Thank you, reporters, for the comprehensive report on the evolution of food security.
Now that we know how the concept evolved, let's look at the challenges and issues that the global food security is facing today. To give the report, here are Dennis, Kad, and Krisha.
Yes, Marian, indeed, as the global population continues to grow, global food security is also at risk. There are several challenges and issues that global food security is facing right now. One is land usage. Basically, the rising amount of agricultural land is lost due to urbanization as well as land usage, which hinders the productions of agricultural goods. Land use conversion remains a significant concern in the Philippines, particularly regarding the unauthorized transformation of agricultural lands into non-agricultural uses without the necessary approvals. This is one of the most enduring reasons why the Philippines is facing high price of rice, which lead to food insecurity. As a matter of fact, this year in the Philippines, a group of people on the Negros Islands, including farmers, different organizations, and lawmakers, stood up against Bacolod City's purchase of 74 hectares area for land banking and once meant for agrarian reform. Fortunately, Senator Kiko Pangilinan proposed a National Land Use Act as his priority bill to regulate land usage in the country. Other than that, high food costs also threaten global food security. Price changes for food have a significant impact on the amount and quality of food. Higher prices directly reduce affordability, pushing millions into food insecurity. As it happens in the Philippines Department of Agriculture declared a food security emergency for rice due to persistently high prices despite a global decline in rice costs and tariff deductions. In addition, SCAD also has a report. SCAD.
Thank you, Dennis. Moreover, China plays a crucial role in global food supply by producing enough food to feed 20% of the world's population, using only 7% of its farmland, but this has come at a high environmental cost and increasing pressure on limited water and land resources. Furthermore, food supplies in both rural and urban areas are in grave danger due to climate change, which has already decreased global crop yields and is making water scarcity worse through harsh weather and increased demand. In March 2025, during a crucial growth stage, record-breaking temperatures were recorded in India's wet-growing regions, including Punjab, Haryana, and Uttar Pradesh. One of the warmest Marches on record is predicted by the India Meteorological Department, IMD, which also projected above normal minimum and maximum temperatures. Smaller harvests, lower incomes, and the possibility of rising food costs are all faced by farmers. If production declines further, some areas may become more dependent on imports. Additionally, with rising threats to food security such as climate change, pests, poor soil, and low crop yields, crop biology offers solutions through improved farming methods, genetic research, and better crop varieties. The rice crisis in Japan, 2025, due to a bad harvest brought on by excessive heat, increased demand from tourists, and restrictions on how much rice farmers may cultivate. Japan is experiencing a severe rice shortage. Stores are running low, prices have more than doubled, and the government is now importing rice from the US and South Korea and releasing emergency rice stockpiles. Japan is under pressure from the crisis to reconsider its stringent agricultural regulations. To add more, let us hear Krisha.
Alright, Scott. Hidden hunger happens when people don't get enough important vitamins and minerals, even if they eat enough food. And the changing eating habits is how people's food choices and eating patterns have evolved over time. With cities growing, incomes rising, busier schedule, and heavy advertising of processed foods, many people have moved away from traditional, healthier diets. Both of those fuels the food security around the world. In addition, Population means the total number of people living in a certain place, like a city, country, or the whole world. A growing population increases pressure on food production system, natural resources, and the environment, all of which challenge global food security, especially in regions with limited access and weak infrastructure. This is evident in the number of people facing the worst level of hunger, called catastrophe. By the UN-backed IPC Integrated Food Security Phase Clarification, more than double last year. Over 95% of these people were in the Gaza Strip or Sudan, but many in Haiti, Malay, and South Sudan also suffered from extreme food shortages. This catastrophe level means people are starving, dying, extremely poor, and have very high levels of severe malnutrition. In Sudan, the ongoing civil war caused famine to be officially declared, with over 24 million people struggling with serious food insecurity. In the Gaza Strip, conditions also got worse, and experts said that about half the population was expected to reach the catastrophe stage last year. On the last note, those are the issues and challenges the global food security is facing right now. Back to you, Marian.
Truly, those are pressing issues and challenges as regards to food security.
To tackle these issues, the FAO proposed a well-established model built on 4 key pillars. Let's all hear them more from our next reporters, Jules and Bonds.
Today, we're here to talk about something that affects every one of us, not just in the Philippines, but around the world, and that's food security.
Exactly. And to fully understand food security, we need to look at its core, the 4 pillars of food security, according to the Food Security Cluster Handbook. These 4 pillars tell us what needs to be in place for everyone to have reliable, safe, and nutritious food.
Let's start with the first pillar, which is food availability.
Food availability means that food must be consistently present. Enough food must be produced, stored, or imported to meet people's needs. This includes everything from farming to transportation to national food reserves.
A good example is India, where the government maintains massive grain reserves, around 41 million tons, through its National Food Security Act. That way, they can keep the food supply stable even during disruptions.
Now let's move on to the second pillar, which is food access.
This pillar focuses on whether people can actually get the food they need, whether through markets, cash, assistance, or their own production. Even if food is available, it doesn't help much if people can reach or afford it.
A great example is Kenya M-Pesa mobile transfer system, which allowed low-income families to receive cash digitally, leading to a 35% increase in household food purchases. That access made easier through technology.
Next, we have the third pillar, food utilization.
Utilization is about how our body uses food properly. This requires nutritious diet, clean water, sanitation, and healthcare to ensure that people can absorb the nutrients they eat.
One great example is Vietnam's Home Garden Project, which helped families grow their own vegetables and led to a 40% increase in veggie consumption, promoting better nutrition at the household level.
And the final pillar is stability.
Stability is about protecting food systems from sudden shocks like typhoons, droughts, war, and market crashes. Even if all the other pillars are strong, without stability, they can collapse quickly during a crisis.
Take the Philippines, for example. After a major typhoon, seed banks were used to help farmers replant and recover, allowing agriculture to bounce back in just 6 months. That's stability in action.
Now that we've explored all pillars, the availability, access, utilization, and stability, let's not forget that real-life situations often test how strong these pillars really are.
Exactly. For example, during the Rohingya crisis in Bangladesh, they had to combine both food distribution and cash assistance to support refugees, showing how multiple pillars must work together in emergencies.
But even with all these efforts, challenges still exist. Climate change, conflict, inflation, and inequality continue to threaten global food security.
And in many places, the gap between available food and actual process is growing, especially for vulnerable groups like women, children, and rural communities.
So, as future leaders and learners, it's important that we understand these pillars, not just as concepts, but as tools to build resilient and fair food systems.
The model indeed addresses the key issues of global food security and hopefully will resolve the issues.
Now that we know and understand the models, let's look at the data and forecast of how the world is doing today in terms of food security. For the current status and forecast, we have Belle and Dottie for the report.
Thank you, Marian. GFSI, or Global Food Security Index, is a model that tracks the state of food security in 113 countries using the four main pillars of food security. The 113 countries included in the GFSI cover 5 regions: Asia Pacific, Europe, Latin America, the Middle East and Africa, and North America. The index is based on a dynamic benchmarking model constructed from 68 qualitative and quantitative drivers of food security. According to the most recent GFSI report, which was conducted by Economist Impact from 2012 to 2022, the global food environment is deteriorating. After reaching its highest point in 2019, the GFSI has declined due to soaring food prices and an extraordinary rise in hunger. A deeper examination of the data highlights the severity of the issue. Since 2019, affordability pillar of the index has declined by 4%, largely due to the pandemic and the war in Ukraine, pushing food prices higher, weakening support systems. Meanwhile, political unrest and armed conflicts have reduced food availability in several areas, causing related scores to drop by as much as 6%. Now, let's take a look at the rankings in this index. Finland leads the world with a score of 83.7, followed closely by Ireland, Norway, and France. 8 of the top 10 performers are high-income European countries, all scoring strongly across the index's 4 pillars. Japan and Canada also made it the top 10. On the other hand, countries like Syria, Haiti, and Yemen have the lowest scores, struggling with conflict, economic instability, and weak food systems. Syria, for example, scores just 36.3, less than half of the Finland's top score. The difference between the top performer and the country at the bottom of the rankings has continued widening since 2019, reflecting the inequality in the global food system. This tells us that countries where farmers had access to agricultural tools, financial services, and where governments supported research, innovation, and strong supply chains tended to achieve better food security scores. Meanwhile, in this ranking, the Philippines has ranked 67th out of the 113 countries, and Ruvian will further discuss it.
Thank you, Dottie. Now that we've seen the global picture of food security, let's zoom in and take a closer look at how the Philippines is doing based on the 2022 Global Food Security Index. According to the Global Food Security Index, which evaluates 113 countries, the Philippines currently ranks 67th overall with a score of 59.3. From 2013, our food security score steadily improves, reaching its highest point during the year 2020. However, based on the data, there's a decline from 2020 to 2022, reflecting recent challenges in our food system. Now let's break down the Philippines' performance by looking at the 4 main indicators measured in the index. First, affordability. With a score of 71.5, food in the Philippines was still fairly affordable in 2022 compared to many countries. Next is availability. We scored 55.2, showing that while food is present, there are still issues in supply and access, especially during crisis. Now for quality and safety, the score was 65.3. This means we have decent standards, but there's room to improve how consistently they're being followed. And finally, sustainability and adaptation, our lowest score at 41.8, ranking 97th. This highlights serious concerns like climate vulnerability, poor resource management, and the lack of long-term planning in agriculture. If no major changes are made, the Philippines may keep struggling with sustainability due to climate change and poor resource management. But with investments in climate-smart agriculture, farmer support, and better infrastructure, food supply and resilience could improve. Affordability and quality may stay stable or slightly improve with continued policy progress. Let's remember, the future depends on how we act now. With the right efforts, we can build a stronger and more food-secure Philippines. And that ends our news of the Global Food Index. Back to you, Marian.
What an eye-opener for all of us about the current status of global food security. Always remember, a world where everyone eats well is a world where everyone lives well. This has been Prince Arcelo I,
Marian Bora,
reporting from 24 Patrol, now signing off.